Hi, everyone. My name is Becky Robinson, and I'm so thrilled to be here today with Dr. Mary Lippitt as we're going to prepare for a webinar on the topic of her new book, Situational Mindsets. So as you're joining us today, we're so glad that you've joined us, and we would love for you to take a quick moment to find the chats. Throughout today's event, we would welcome you to communicate with us in the chat, and we would ask that you select all panelists and attendees so that everyone on the event can hear your comments and see what you have to say. We will be welcoming any questions in the chat throughout today's broadcast, and toward the end of the hour, I will come back on with Mary to have her answer some of your questions as time allows. So if you could take a quick moment and let us know where you're calling in from, we would love to see where you are located in the world. We were talking with Mary this morning about the fact that in Florida, where she lives, it's exceedingly hot today. In Michigan, where I live, we're expecting some freezing temperatures and snow later on. So welcome in Baltimore and Orange, California, in Florida, LA, Ohio, Virginia, Georgia. Now, if you happen to be calling in today with a group from your organization as a professional development opportunity, we would love to hear the name of your organization so that we can give you a shout out. I'm seeing lots of states. I'm seeing my first international caller from Calgary, Canada. We always love to call out those of you who are calling in from around the world, so thank you. In Bath, England, in Rochester, Minnesota, where there are snow flurries. Wow. And some folks in Ashland, Ohio, at Ashland University, some folks at Appalachian State University. So welcome, and welcome to those of you in Paris, France, at the Altran organization, and in Quebec. We are so thrilled that you are choosing to invest your time to learn with us today. So welcome in Mexico as well. Thanks to all of you who are investing your time with us. We are going to get started in just a few minutes on this topic of boosting mental agility and critical thinking. So a couple other items that you might want to know. One is that we are also broadcasting live on Facebook today, and we will have a recording of today's event in case you'd like to watch again and learn this material or share it with a colleague. So welcome to Breda in Ireland. Wow. Thanks again to all of you. So we will also be having several polls during today's event, and we will welcome your engagement and participation with those polls. Or if you would like to use Twitter to share your thoughts throughout today's broadcast, we would invite you to use the hashtag Situational Mindsets. Just a quick reminder, though, to all of you who are choosing to communicate in chat, we would love to see you use the drop-down that says all panelists and attendees so that you can interact and engage with the others on the call. Wow, I'm going to take a deep breath. It's a great day. So, Mary, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that you're taking the time to share your book with us. So for those of you who have not met Mary before, I want to take a moment to help you get to know her a little bit more. Dr. Mary Lippitt is an award-winning author, speaker, and consultant, and she founded Enterprise Management Limited in 1985 with the purpose of providing leaders with practical and effective solutions to navigate a changing business climate. She's known for her pioneering work linking leadership and goal achievement, and is recognized as a leader in executing change, leadership effectiveness, and strategic thinking. So Dr. Lippitt released her book, Brilliant or Blunder: 6 Ways Leaders Navigate Uncertainty, Opportunity, and Complexity in 2014 as an update to her 2004 book, The Leadership Spectrum. She's also a co-author on a number of other works with authors like Ken Blanchard and Stephen Covey, and she's been featured in publications like Leader to Leader, Executive Excellence, the Journal of Business Strategy, Industry Week, and on Sirius Radio. So Dr. Lippitt's most recent book, Situational Mindsets, was released, I think, last month or this month, not long ago.
Yes.
This month. And it's available on Amazon and other online retailers, and we will encourage you to check that out later on. So welcome again, Mary. I'm going to let you share your thoughts, and I'll be back on throughout today's broadcast with polls and questions.
Thank you so much, Becky. I'm really excited about the opportunity to talk about boosting mental agility and critical thinking, because I think it's one of the needs that shows up in every CEO study, that they need to have, either they call it critical thinking, strategic thinking, better judgment. And this is coming because decision-making is rolling down in an organization, and more people are in a decision-making role. And also, I think that the complexity of our decisions are getting to be so much more common. The interdependencies are becoming more pressing, and the ramifications sometimes are becoming extremely costly. So let me start by just defining what I mean by mental agility. I'm talking about the ability to pivot from one perspective to another perspective, but I also am talking about this based on current circumstances. So what I'm talking about with mental agility is making sure that we stay out of the ruts, the routines, and habits, because if we want different results, we're going to have to do something differently. And so what we're talking about is really something very dynamic, because our world is in such a dynamic situation. Now, I've said that, but I'd also like to actually make this a little bit more tangible for you. So I'm going to ask you to just do a little exercise with me. And if you're in a room by yourself, you can stretch out your hand. And if you're in a room where others are watching you, you can just do it this way. But I'm going to ask you to, with both eyes open, would you please point to a distant object in your room and just recall what you see. So if you just have to do it like this, that's fine. Just point and see what you're pointing at. Next, would you close your right eye and see where you're pointing? And then finally, would you close your left eye and see where you're pointing? And what you'll notice is that there's been a jump. There is, both eyes are going to focus on different points of view. And that is common because we have a dominant eye. Well, we also have a dominant point of view. And this is what I'm going to be talking about today, is to make sure that we don't rely always on our dominant point of view, because that point of view has been generated over time and we may be missing certain opportunities. So what I'm going to be talking about is situational mindset awareness. And this is a practice of collecting and grasping all the data that's available to understand what is facing you currently, so that you can identify opportunities and constraints to set the best priorities that you can do at this point in time. And this enables us to effectively plan to succeed in our dynamic world. So what we're talking about is something very different than what most people talk about. Most people are talking about leadership style, or things like, do I have an open door, or those kinds of things. And those are all valid. They're very good. We need those. But we also need to develop the ability to think situationally. So what is a situational mindset? It's a filter or a bucket to collect information. So it is nothing more than having a framework where we could collect information. It's a guarantee that when we collect all that information, we're going to be guaranteed against having a blind spot that would create a blunder. And those blunders are getting expensive. It is an objective examination of current realities. And I'm going to stress the word objective, because most of the work that we do with others when we're trying to develop ourselves or others is really subjective. It's inside us. We're talking about the outer world here, and that is an objective, fact-based reality. And it encourages the evaluation of multiple alternatives. Now, my experience has been that people usually come up with two alternatives. We do this or we do that. And what happens usually is one is so clearly better that it's really not an alternative. You basically already have decided. So what we're talking about here with a situational mindset is something very different. It is taking a look at 6 buckets. Now, historically, we've had 3, and it was called faster, cheaper, and better. And we always said that's what we wanted. We wanted to do things faster, cheaper, and better. And then people would say, well, yeah, but which one do you really want first? If we do things faster, it may not be better, it may not be cheaper. So we have to make trade-offs. But those 3 have been expanded to 6. And let me review those with you. The first is the inventing bucket or mindset. And it says, what can we do to develop new products and services? What can we design that will, attract people? Now, this is not just the fashion industry with design. This is, cell phones that have designs. I mean, even toasters have designs these days. And it's also the ability to create new synergies within an organization. Usually this is done by applying information technology or some other kind of technology. So this is asking, what can we do new and different? How can we be the leader in our industry? The second mindset is taking a look at how do we gain and retain our customers? How do we keep the customer base and also basically grow it? Because we always want to keep growing. And we want to make sure that our company or our unit or our function has high recognition. People, when they hear the name of your organization, think highly of it. Now, the third bucket is a little different. The first two are externally focused. The third one is shifting to an internal focus. And what it's asking is, do we really have a seamless infrastructure? Or are there silos? Are organizations working together? Are they just for a common goal? Or are they working for a unit goal? How are the systems that we have put in place? And this could be, a recruitment system. This could be an information system. This could be a billing system. What are the systems that we have in place, and are they as effective as they should be? But this is also the bucket or the mindset that looks at what are the policies that we have. Could be a pay policy, a promotional policy, a customer service policy, some kind of guideline that we give others so that we know that everybody's working with the same set of directions. The next mindset is the performing mindset. And the performing mindset wants to take a look at creating the seamless operational practices. The developing mindset's looking at the macro issues, the organizational big picture. The performing mindset is taking a look at the very details. How can we improve cycle time? How can we improve quality? How can we improve our efficiencies? And this is also taking a look at the financial measures. Now, ROI, return on investment, would be for the public, for the private sector. For the public sector, this would be more like, are we meeting budget or kinds of issues? So the whole concept of the details of how we're getting our work done is the focal point for the performing mindset. Now, the protecting mindset takes a look at how we have our employees. Do we have the talent we need? Do we have a culture that we are proud of that's high performing? Do we have engagement? Do our teams work well together? Do we have a sense of teamwork? This is all the looking at the staff, the culture, and also succession planning and looking at the future to make sure we have the talent for the future that have the skill sets that we need. Now, we have done a study of the perceived value of all 6 of these mindsets, and sometimes the protecting mindset is not valued as highly because it looks soft. But I will remind you that Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So this may seem soft, but this is critical to an organization's success. The last mindset is the challenging mindset, which says that we're going to look at what are the emerging trends, what are the kinds of risks or threats that might present themselves in the future. What are the new opportunities we could leverage? Can we create some new partnerships or some alliances? So this is taking a long-term view into the future. Now, I've provided this with a very organizational framework, but I would like to take it down to a personal level. So I'm going to suggest that some of you, like me, have had the practice of buying a car. And let's just take a look at how these mindsets play a role in the purchasing a car process. The inventing mindset would say, what new technology does it have? Does it have Bluetooth? Does it have side lane monitoring? All those kinds of questions. Another question from the inventing point of view would be, is it stylish? Does it look cool, kind of thing? The catalyzing mindset would ask, what is the competition offering? And is there really going to be given great customer service? These are very important questions to see, what are the kinds of things that are out there in the world of automobile sales. The developing mindset is saying, is there a dealer or facility nearby? And do they have the capacity to make timely repairs? Now, I'm going to just tell you a personal experience. I once bought a Peugeot, and I didn't recognize, well, I knew that they were built in France, but I didn't realize that if I ever needed a part, it had to be sourced from France. So what I thought would take a couple of days took several weeks. So again, this was a topic that I had overlooked when I actually bought the car. The performing mindset for buying a car is, how much does it cost? How much does it cost to operate? What are the insurance rates for this car? What are the miles per gallon? The protecting mindset would say, is it a safe car? We have Volvo in particular advertises as a safe car. What does the warranty cover? The challenging mindset would say, hey, is it better to lease or buy? And will it meet my needs in the future? If I buy a sports car and I'm going to start a family, I may need to recognize I don't have a back seat. So these are the complex issues. I mean, when you take a look at all these questions, and I haven't covered them all. I actually had a friend who bought a car and it was too large for the garage. So, we have all these factors interplaying, and that's why it's important to have a framework to set them out and make sure that we understand all of the aspects that we need to cover. So I will tell you that I see the advantages of using a situational mindset to do the critical analysis for the mental agility as being something that let me analyze opportunities, risk, and the ramifications. If I set up a new accounting program and I decide to launch at the end of the year, there's a ramification that accounting is going to be very busy at the end of the year. So I need to check out the ramifications. It will also let me surface more alternatives. And I really will promote the idea that 3 alternatives is a minimum. It will let me assess potential goals and make sure that the impact, the outcome, the results are the ones that I really want to achieve first. Because again, our priorities have to change as the situation warrants. And it will ensure, therefore, that I make a smart call. So what I'm offering here is a way of looking at reality and making a choice. And again, let me just suggest that we make this a more concrete example. And I'm just going to ask you to think about a situation in where your organization annual sales continue to decline, or basically you're experiencing a situation where growth is not happening. So what action would you take first? Would you determine what new products and services should be offered? Would you analyze how to gain new customers and retain current customers? Would you consider what internal systems need to be revamped or changed? Would you evaluate how to improve production quality and efficiency? Would you consider the impact on employees, the culture, and the retention rates? Or would you search for new niches and alliances to prepare for the future? Now, I would like to caution you, many of the times, when you're asked to choose something, it's clear that one is like saying, I contribute to charity, and one is like saying, I abuse animals. What I would like to offer to you is that all the mindsets add value. The issue really is to pick the one that you think adds the most value given the current situation. So I'm going to ask you to pick one of those alternatives. Would you pick A, B, C, D, E, or F as your first action? Again, you probably will address them all eventually, but what would you be doing first?
And Mary, I have put up the poll, so we welcome you to respond with your first choice of these 6 options. And we'll give you a few moments to do that. We welcome your input. as we identify together which of these situational mindsets we are likely to pursue. I'm not able to answer the poll since I launched it. The poll should be on your screen, so we would invite you to go ahead and select on the poll itself rather than on the chat with your response if you are able. A couple of you are putting that in the chat. So I'm going to give you
to hit the button that they choose?
Yes, on the poll functionality itself, which should be on your screen. And it looks like about 2/3 of the people have answered, so I'm going to give just a few more seconds. You may have to maximize your Zoom panel in order to see the poll. Some folks are not seeing it, but we do have about 2/3 of the people who have taken it. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'll share those results. It looks like B was the most popular response, with 52% of people responding using that second mindset, and 7% on A, 12% on C, 13% on D, 6% on E, and 11% on F. So pretty evenly distributed amongst the other choices.
And what I will say is that this obviously makes a great deal of sense. Again, all of these are going to be used at some point in time. But the question was, what are you going to do first? If your sales are declining, the likelihood is that you're going to have some problems with your customers. So you need to be focused on the customers. It could be that there's a new product needed. It could be that your internal billing system is wrong. It could be a quality issue or an on-time delivery issue. It could be that you have lost the key people in sales making, but the focal point first is to find out what the customer needs to have done next. So I would just suggest that, it's not surprising to me that B came out the priority. And I would just like to follow that question up with another question. Let's take a situation where your sales are expected to quickly increase by 30% in the next year. What action would you want to take first? And again, the choices are the same. Determine new products, analyze new customers and retain current customers, consider what internal systems should be revamped or changed, evaluate how to improve productivity, quality, efficiency, consider the impact on employees' culture and retention, or search for new niches and alliances to prepare for the future. So would you take a moment, please, and answer the next poll?
And I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. This one says sales are expected to quickly increase by 30%. And what would you do first? And we'll give you a few moments to answer. Hopefully those of you who are having trouble seeing the poll before would be able to see the poll this time. And we appreciate your input as you think through this challenge. It's a challenge I would not mind having. I don't know about the rest of you on the call. Okay, we'll just give it.
I just might want to have it a little bit more gradual than 30% all at once.
Well, true, true. Okay,
it'd be nice to plan for 30%, wouldn't it be?
It would be indeed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll. It looks like nearly 70% of folks have responded. And let's take a look at those results together. Overwhelmingly, 50% of people decided that if they were expecting 30% growth, that they would evaluate the impact of that growth on production processes and quality. Another big group looked at consider what systems should be revamped or established, 23%, and then a few people in each of those other mindsets.
And again, I think that what we're saying here is that there was a major shift, because before we were looking at B, which is externally at the customer, and now we're looking at D, which is internal to the organization. And what we have are alternatives C, D, and E are internal to the organization, and the other three are external to the organization. And if we want to be effective, we have to make sure that our external reality matches our internal reality, and then those are all aligned. But in this situation, obviously, you already had all the customer bases, So the issue was, how do we deliver now that we have all these customers? So let me ask one more poll of you, and I think I know the answer just because of the prior two polls. But how many of you selected the same answer, the same letter both times, and how many of you selected different letters? Would you be willing to respond to that question, please?
I didn't realize I was muted and talking. So thanks to those of you who are beginning to answer this poll. I did have a question in the chat regarding the recording and the slides. We will have a recording of today's event. Later on in today's session, we will share with you Dr. Lippitt's email address. For those of you who are interested in finding out about getting slides, we would welcome you emailing Dr. Lippitt after the event to check in with her about the availability of some of the slides. And it looks like we have quite a few of you who have already responded to this poll, so I am going to show those results. And it looks like 90% of people selected a different letter.
I think we could say that was the majority. And what I'm going to suggest here is that the information, the situation changed your actions. And this is a very different way of looking at how to help leaders become more effective. So this isn't developing, their communication style per se. It's not developing a specific, new ability to analyze financial reports or whatever else. It's the situation that drives a difference too. Now, I'm not discounting the importance of others, but I'm just suggesting that as we move into the 21st century, we have to start talking more about the environment that we're working in and make sure that we know how to make the adjustments in a timely fashion. Because there are companies, BlackBerry, we used to be a dominant provider of cell phones, and they didn't do design and they lost out. Polaroid, Kodak, people who don't change pay a price. There's a fun quote that I like from Mark Twain that says, even if you're on the right track, and he meant a railroad track, even if you're on the right track, if you sit there, you're going to get run over. And that's the whole concept between mental agility and situational thinking and critical thinking. So what I'd like to do is say, okay, we're saying it's important. How do we detect it? We detect it by simply asking questions. What's your current goal? Everyone's willing to talk about what they care about. What challenges do you face? What results are critical to you right now? What metrics are you most concerned about and monitoring closely? And of course, you may not feel comfortable asking this one, but it is one that gets asked among people who know each other a bit well. What keeps you awake at night? So this gives you some understanding of what's driving another person. And there's a real advantage to this, because what it lets you do is it lets you influence beyond your authority level. We all have a title and we have a certain level of formal authority, but what Mindsets lets us do is influence informally. And I define that as the ability to predict responses based on mindsets and having the credibility and knowledge to shape thinking, to develop win-win or mutually benefit or common ground outcomes. It is the practice of both and thinking, and it makes what seems impossible very possible. And again, many of us want to influence up the chain of command or want to influence with peers. And so we really need to think about approaching a situation a little bit differently. We tend to approach it from a very rational point of view, but there are other alternatives. And so let me just suggest a situation where you have a new CEO who wants to concentrate on expanding beyond the regional scope that you currently have, which is the catalyzing mindset. But you know a little bit more because you've been with the organization a while, and you really think that the focus should be on improving the product quality because they've been increasing complaints, which are being driven by the performing mindset. So you have to change the CEO's thinking, and you're not the CEO or you're not the board of directors. So what can you do? You can use the situational mindsets and actually think about, what should I start the conversation with? And I've provided 6 alternatives. And the first 3, quality improvement, risk management, efficiency, and productivity, all reflect the performing mindset, which is your mindset. So you want to talk about what's in it for me. And you want to start the conversation in that way. And what the situational mindsets will suggest is that you adopt a what's in it for them approach and start with a conversation about increasing customer base. Because frankly, improving quality, risk management, and efficiency will have an impact on customer base. But I want to get the CEO's interest. I want to trigger basically a reciprocity response where then the CEO will listen to my thoughts too. And again, you might want to start by saying something where, if we could stop the loss of customers, that will do a lot to show progress. And so you can tie together your mindset with your CEO's mindset. So what I'm trying to talk about here is increasing the openness of your thinking and your mindset. And sometimes we don't even recognize that our mindset has become stable. So I'm going to ask you a question. What color is a cardinal, the bird cardinal? What color would you say it is? And we're not doing a poll on this because I'm going to make the assumption that you're going to say that cardinals are red. And I will tell you you're right. But I will also tell you that there are yellow cardinals. And the issue is here, are we willing to listen to the information that might be shared with us? Because the information flow, when it's respected and when it's recognized and when it's actually applied, basically grows fantastically well, so you have a better exchange of data and you can make better decisions. But we have to contend with the fact that people tend to see only what they are prepared to see. We take in information, frankly, that confirms what we already thought, so we feel comfortable with how we've always thought. But we always don't take in all the other information. It's sort of like the dominant I situation. We've developed a dominant way of thinking, and we may not consider all of the alternatives. So the concept of mental agility and critical thinking is, how is it that we can really, how is it that we can really develop mental agility? What we're going to be doing is challenging the routines and habits and the assumptions that we have to get a comprehensive understanding of current realities and show a willingness to think beyond our existing convictions and shift priorities to capture the opportunities and to avoid the pitfalls that the situation may present us with. So I've talked about it. I've said that it's a great idea. So the next question really is, what is it that we could do about it? And here are some suggestions. One suggestion is to start your staff meeting by asking, what have we learned since our last meeting? It's really interesting that a lot of staff meetings have become sort of routine. It's a series of one-on-one conversations. And we don't always get the chance to think about what has changed. So this is one way to do that. Ask, what have we learned since our last meeting? If we're not learning something, we are in a routine and we're not paying attention to new realities. We can make sure that we ask for more alternatives. We could ask, what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we be doing less often? And what should we be doing more often? And again, notice that the phrasing is not personal. It's not pointing a finger at anybody. It's not saying that, what we did in the past was wrong. What it's saying is situations have changed, so how do we adapt? And it's a very open kind of conversation to have. Another way of boosting mental agility is to ask, what persistent issues should we analyze to move forward? And again, I will emphasize the last part of that, to move forward. This does not mean that we have to solve everything. This just means we have to make some progress or move the ball forward. It doesn't mean we have to do the touchdown right away. Another option is to require the use of situational mindsets when new or complex issues confront us. And what I'd like to suggest here is that we really are doing that already. So I will just offer to you a couple of examples. And pardon me. And one of them is to ask you to look at this image and to answer the question, how many faces do you see? Most people immediately see the 2. When they focus a little bit more on the nose, which could be the elbow of another person, they'll see 2 more, which would be 4, but they may not look at the gentleman's ear and notice a woman is in that ear cavity also. So technically there are 5. But again, at first look it's 2, then it's 4, and then it's 5, because we have spent more time doing the analysis. So why don't we do the analysis right away? Because there's so many blocks that we have to critical thinking. And again, I'm defining critical thinking as the use of an objective and disciplined practice to examine information and evaluate its accuracy, relevancy, and implications. So it's an objective, fact-based, but comprehensive process that we collect the information and then we weigh it to determine what it is that we really need to do next. But as suggested, there's many blocks to it. So our last poll question takes a look at what do you think is blocking you the most at this point in time? Do you think that you have limited time, that there's no time to consider options, you've got so much on your plate? Do you think that there's a concern that there'll be rejection or retribution if you speak up? Do you doubt your ability to add anything important? Are you sort of resigned so you don't think anything will change, so why speak up? Do you have fear that more work will be required of you if you make a suggestion, they'll say, okay, now you do it? Or do you think it's because no one really requires you to think critically? Would you take a look at the poll question and pick one? I know some of you may be tempted to pick more than one, but really pick one that you think is the most dominant block that you're experiencing in terms of blocking your critical thinking.
And we're starting to get quite a few responses, so I'll give a bit more time for folks to get their answers registered so that we can see the dominant reason that we don't think critically. Thanks to those of you who are engaging and participating. A reminder that if you have some questions for Dr. Lippitt that you'd love to see us answer later on, we can do that at the end of the hour, toward the end of the hour. I do see someone saying that none of the above fits what stands in the way to critical thinking. So Elizabeth, if you'd like to share with all panelists and attendees any other block that might keep you from critical thinking, we'd love to see it. And then there's also a request from Sharon to see the meeting question slide again. So maybe we can go back to that later on in the hour as time allows. Okay. And it looks like about 2/3 of you have answered. I'm going to give you just a couple of more seconds if you're wanting to put your response in. We do have a couple of other people who said none of the above. Some people are saying all of the above.
That's what I usually get.
All of the above. Okay, here we go. And let's take a look at those results together. 43% of people say time pressure, no time to consider options. Looks like the next biggest is a tie for 19% at fear of rejection, ridicule, or retribution, and resigned that nothing will happen. It's a done deal, go along to get along, and they know better. And then a few folks on the other options.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I do think that I personally feel the time pressure, so I'm glad that I'm not alone in that. But sometimes I have to ask myself the question, do I take the time to get it right the first time? Because if I don't, I'll be spending more time later fixing up the problems. There used to be, a commercial for a car maintenance company, I believe, and it said, pay me now or pay me later. Those were your two choices. And the pay me now was going to be much less. So I understand the pressure. I also understand the resignation and the fear that there'll be some kind of retribution. But it's interesting. What we're saying is that we need to create an environment that's safe and open for people to have that conversation and to be sure that we provide the time. And I think most of you know and have experienced the process of brainstorming And you know, it can be done in as little as 5 or 10 minutes. So what's really interesting is I think we feel the need to act. And that makes sense in many instances. We have to act quickly. But I will argue that the complexity that we're facing these days means that we also need to be able to think to get it right the first time. And sometimes thinking does not take weeks and months. It can be done in a reasonable amount of time. But I also will argue that you're already doing the process of critical thinking. So I'm going to give you an example. This is not a poll question. I'm going to give you an example of an aircraft manufacturer who has developed a brand new plane. It's expensive, but customers really want it. But it's so expensive that the manufacturer decided not to include a safety package in the base price. So it was an add-on cost. And so I would ask you, what are the risks? And I think most of you could quickly identify that this refers to the Boeing MAX 8. And the cost of the extra software package was $80,000, which is not minor. But when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar plane, it doesn't really make a great deal of sense. And then when you take a look at the risk to the organization, I can tell you that Boeing has admitted to more than $1 billion lost. So again, was that trade-off the best trade-off to make at this point in time? And I think that there are many people who will say that that was a mistake. Let me give you another example. A consumer products company launches a brightly colored laundry detergent formed into a small square for people to use at home, and they provided standard packaging. What are the risks? And again, I think that it doesn't take a lot of time to recognize that children are frequently around their parent who's doing the laundry, and if there's standard packaging, there may be an issue with child safety. And Procter & Gamble did face this with the launch of Tide Pods. They have obviously addressed it very effectively. But again, what was the cost? What was the risk not to identify this in advance? And what I would just suggest is that the whole process of critical thinking and using the framework of the situational mindsets will give us an ability to identify these risks before they become costly to the organization. So how do we really do this on a sort of a day-to-day basis? I'm going to suggest that we use something called a checklist. And I'm going to, obviously, that lawyers use it, pilots use it, doctors use it. And it's really interesting because what people sometimes resist a checklist because they think everything is automatic or it's just routine, it's obvious we're going to do this. But in reality, we use checklists all the time, whether it's our to-do list, our grocery list, or whatever else. And so what we can do is to take a look at using a checklist so that people ask the questions. Part of our role as a decision maker or a leader is to help other people make a smart choice, giving them the parameters that they need to investigate to make that smart choice really improves outcomes. And what I will suggest to you, it's first of all, surgeons are highly trained, so using a checklist is not any critique of their skill set, but having a surgical checklist reduced errors by 35% and deaths by 47%. Pretty good results. So what I would argue is that we can use a situational mindset checklist to develop mental agility and critical thinking. So let me just give you a couple examples of how you can really do this. The situational checklist is basically asking for every mindset, what are the questions that should be asked? What are the things that need to be investigated? And so for the inventing mindset, it could be, what is outside the box that we can tap into? What if we had no constraints? We had all the money, we had all the resources in the world. What could we be doing? And then we could maybe back it into something that is reasonable. The catalyzing mindset would be asking question, what is the competition doing? We need to keep our eye on the customer, but we also have to keep the eye on what the other players are. It may not be the competition, it may be the regulators, and there may be a lot of different aspects that we need to consider. What can we do to grow our customer base and retain our reputation or build our reputation? Developing a mindset, what are our plans? What are the schedule and goals? Are they clear? Are they aligned? What systems need to be improved? And, how much are we working together for the common organizational good or the common unit good rather than working in a team or some other level maximization? And just to finish the kinds of questions that could be asked, I'm going to suggest under the performing mindset, what is the cost-benefit analysis? Now, for governmental employees, this probably wouldn't be relevant, but the question would be rephrased to are we on budget and are we meeting all the regulations? But no matter what the industry is, we would ask the question, what will improve quality? How can we improve our processes? The protecting mindset questions could be, do we have the skills and the staff we need? Are we retaining them? Do we need to do some succession planning? Is there a high level of engagement? All the kinds of internal culture questions that are so relevant. The catalyzing mindset questions are our current assumptions still valid? It's interesting to me that when we look back in the 1995 era, bankers said that they could give a 95% mortgage because home prices never fall below 5%. We found out that was a false assumption. We have to check the validity of our assumptions. Recently, there was an assumption that interest rates would be going quite quickly higher. That was a false assumption. So we constantly have to check what our assumptions are. What trends will present opportunities and threats to us? So we have to look to the future to preempt those. What I'm going to just summarize in a way and say, what I am proposing for mental agility and critical thinking is to make sure that you ask the right questions rather than thinking that you need all the right answers. In the past, we've assumed that a leader is effective if they know how to answer every question. And I would like to turn that around and suggest that what we really need is to have people who know how to ask the right questions, collect the information from all the sources so that the priorities that need to be addressed first, whether it's stopping a sales slide or handling a fast growth in sales, can be met. So I'm talking about helping people learn how to ask questions, which is not a very hard task to do. It can be done with a checklist. So I would like to just suggest to you that I want to thank you for the interest in this topic and see if you have any questions or comments that you can include in the chat, or if something comes up later, you can contact me.
Sure. So we have had lots of different comments throughout today's event, and I want to invite everyone, if you have asked a question, to go ahead and either copy paste it again, or if you want to type it in, I'll be scrolling through to try to find those. Mary, we did have a request to look at a couple of slides again. Someone was wanting to go back and look at the meeting questions slide, and then someone else was wanting to take a look at the influence definition slide. That may inspire some additional questions or comments. So here's the meeting questions slide for you to review. Hold on just one second. I'm going to see if I can find some questions and comments. Lots of chatter in the chat, which we so much appreciate. Lots of interaction. Okay, so here's a question for you, Mary. We have a participant who's wondering about if you teach this class privately or if someone could hire you to teach this. And I'll bet that you would be happy and thrilled to communicate via email about that after today's session.
Yes, we do train this, offer training in this course, and we also train trainers.
Perfect. We also have another question regarding the recording. We will have a recording today. We are not sending out a copy of the slides, but we would welcome you to email Dr. Lippitt to get, if you have a specific request for a specific slide, and you can communicate with her about that
Becky, if I
directly.
could interrupt you for 1 second.
Sure.
If people have asked for a specific slide, like they asked for this one that's up right now, and they asked for the influencing one, I'll make those available. If there's specific slides that people want, I can make those available.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And Kelly, if you can grab the email address and go ahead and put that in the chat. Folks are asking that we put the email address in chat. Aaron is asking, can we share the checklist? I'm guessing those checklists are in the new book.
Yes. Actually, because the slides are compressed things, in the new book, there are about 10 for each of the mindsets. And what we ask people to do is to look at the questions and then tailor them for their organization. Because different industries will have different words. Like under catalyzing, we're talking about customer, but that could be patient, that could be taxpayer, that could be client, that could be a lot of things. So in the book, we give like 10 to start brainstorming what the right questions are for that function, for that industry, for that group. And we ask them to look at this. And it's a great team activity to think about, okay, sit back and say, what are the questions that we should be asking when we're facing new and complex situations? And that's the purpose of this. I mean, this does not require, you know, a crystal ball. You don't have to try to read somebody's mind. You can just ask the questions and you can surface information to make the right call. I mean, it's the information that we use today between declining sales and sales growth. That's easy to ask. You know, somebody's willing to ask that question. You know, if you ask somebody, what is my leadership, your leadership philosophy? You know, you're not going to get anything concrete to work with. But these are very tactical, operational, objective questions that everybody can learn. Everybody can understand why we're doing something. Everybody can get alignment if we ask these questions. It's just, to me, it's a simple way to improve our mental agility and critical thinking.
Yeah, it's really powerful to think about the fact that that we can learn how to apply the correct mindset at the correct time, depending upon what the situation is. And stopping to think critically about which of these mindsets we're applying in the situation can be a very powerful tool.
Yes, and
totally
I will
agree.
Just add to that some people tend to think that this is my style. And I would like to emphasize that, you know, if 90%, I believe, was the poll response of the people who changed their next action based on the situation. And I'm going to think I could say that there were many different styles of communication. There were many different introverts, extroverts, you know, controllers or whatever else in our group. So all that is important, but it doesn't always impact what we do. So we've been looking at who we are, which is great. And we need to know how to do the job, which is our skill set. But we also need to know what we need to do. And that's what we're talking about here.
No, that makes lots of sense. So what does this situation require of me as a leader? And how can I understand the situation and apply the correct mindset at the correct time? Or the most, I guess correct is probably not the right word, is it, Mary? It's not a value judgment.
Appropriate.
It's appropriate.
Yeah, it's what has to happen first. I mean, we can have, I hear that there's a snowstorm coming up. Well, let's just talk about California has fires. Mm-hmm. I mean, they made a decision to turn off power. They've made a decision to evacuate people. That decision was made based on current reality. And that's what we have to deal with. And the number of routine decisions, in my opinion, are being reduced, and the number of complex, ambiguous, precedent-setting situations is being increased. So that's why we need mental agility and critical thinking more than ever before.
Yeah, that's really powerful. So we want to welcome, if there are any additional questions, I did have a request that we look at the next slide from this one. If you could just move it forward. Yes, thank you. People wanted to see the whole checklist, both slides. So let's see. I'm not sure who asked that question, but I also had a request to take a look again at the definition of critical thinking. So thank you, Stuart, for that request. If you're willing to go back to that one, Mary. Here we go. The use of an objective and disciplined practice to examine information and also evaluate its accuracy, relevancy, and implications. Oh, and one more request to look at the influence definition.
Okay, can I just emphasize that this is a practice. This is something that people can learn quickly. This is, again, not asking me to change the way I interact with people or the other things that are a little bit harder for me to do. This is a practice that I can change pretty quickly.
Sure. So Michelle is asking, what's the main difference between this book and Brilliant or Blunder?
This book starts with a story. This is a story of Kate, who's a new VP of sales at a printing company in Colorado, and her sales have been down, and some of her people wanted her job, so there's a lot of political potential intrigue. And then she turns it around using situational mindsets to analyze their customers. And then she realizes that there's been tension between sales and operations or production, and she turns that around. And she had started working for this company that was being currently run by an individual with micromanagement tendencies, and she turns it around. So this book, the first actually 10 chapters, talks about how its situational mindsets are used. And then the last few chapters talk about how to actually practice it. So this book was written as a way of explaining how to use it, because a lot of people were asking, okay, I like it, but how can I use it kind of question. So this book answers that question.
Great. So Andrea has the question. She says she finds it challenging to encourage colleagues to practice critical thinking. What recommendations would you have about how to encourage others to think more critically?
Well, first of all, I think that the word critical thinking has a negative connotation to begin with. So I think that there are other ways to mention it. Let's thoroughly examine this. Or you could say, I really like what you're doing. Let's make sure that we've considered all alternatives to really maximize it. So I don't think that you necessarily have to use the words critical thinking, because it implies sometimes that if you're asking, you say, Mary, I want you to do better critical thinking, it sounds like I haven't done a sufficient job. But you could say, Mary, what are the factors you've considered? Are there other factors that we should also incorporate? I mean, I think there are ways of encouraging critical thinking without having to use the words critical thinking. Or mental agility, which implies that my mental processes are stagnant. So I think the question is, this is a really complex issue. Let's take a couple of moments to look at it from all aspects to make sure that we are doing the best that we can, or achieving the best results, or ensure our success, or something like that. So I think that the questions need to be reframed a little bit. I've used the term critical thinking here just because it is something that encompasses a lot of different ways of encouraging people to re-examine. Sometimes the question is, are there any potential downsides? This sounds so good, there's no low-hanging fruit left. What can we do differently? So I think there are ways of asking for critical thinking that doesn't imply any criticism, because one of the things that happens is when criticism develops, I start to own the position and I won't think anything else. I will just defend my position up, down, backwards. So it's how you introduce the concept of saying, let's look a little deeper than we might be. Let's make sure that we're not overlooking something. Or another option is to say, okay, this is a great idea. How are we going to communicate the benefits of this initiative, this change project, from all 6 mindsets? Because what happens if it's a larger project, you're going to have people with different mindsets operating. You're going to have to explain the benefit from different points of view. What's really interesting in the past is that a change initiative was sold with one goal or one outcome, and people sometimes resisted. I remember a situation where people's computer systems were changed overnight, but also their reporting relationships were changed, and there was a lot of resistance. And when you ask the question, what was the big issue? It wasn't the new hardware. It was the fact that they changed people's lunch hours. So again, we need to ask more questions because there are more ramifications than we might see at first glance.
That's helpful. So, Mary, if we could go to the final slide, we do have a few offers for folks on today's call that we don't want them to miss. If you enjoyed today's session, and from the comments that I'm seeing, many of you did and found it to be exceedingly valuable in introducing some new concepts to you, we would encourage you to check out Mary's new book, Situational Mindsets, which is available on Amazon and other online retailers. We would appreciate anyone who's already read the book leaving an Amazon review. And for the folks who have joined us today, the first 7 people who request a free consultation will be able to do so and get a free 20-minute session. And also the first 25 people who request will be able to take the Situational Mindsets indicator with complimentary access codes. And the way that you can access either of those two offers is by emailing Mary at situationalmindsets.com. We will be sending out some follow-up, which includes a link to the recording of this session and a restate of these offers and some links to Mary's book and website. And we would encourage you to respond to her as quickly as possible if you're wanting to jump on one of these offers. So thank you so much for investing this time with us today. We're grateful for your engagement and participation. And Mary, thank you for sharing generously these ideas and concepts with those who have joined us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Becky, for helping us do this.